Of all the things we've got on in the sector at the moment, the three things which are probably driving the most activity, the first of them would be decarbonisation. As people probably know, New Zealand has an incredibly renewable electricity system. It's about 80% renewable, and what that means is that if you change a process from using fossil fuels to using electricity, you're making a huge reduction in the emissions from that process. But of course that's going to lead to an enormous expansion of the electricity industry. It could be anything between a half and the same size again as big in 2050 as it is today, so doubling the size of the electricity industry. I suppose the second trend, it's just the sort of the end of scale economies, if you like. So electricity's always been about scale economies. It's been generating at very large scale and then transporting the electricity the length of the country through things like this. But of course the economics of very small scale generation has improved immeasurably in the last 20 years. So now things like solar panels, in some cases, can actually be as cheap or cheaper than grid reticulated electricity. And I suppose that links to the third theme, which is democratisation. So consumers are increasingly wanting to have more active involvement in the products and services they buy. And combined with this changing economics of small-scale technologies with electricity generation and storage, it allows consumers to participate much more in the way in which they meet their power needs.
So are we seeing the emergence of prosumers in the market?
Yeah, so we've always talked about electricity consumers, and I suppose the view was people who use electricity just sort of take what they're given, and benign central planners work out how to give it to them. But these days, of course, if you've got your own solar panels or you have your own battery, you can in some cases create your own electricity, and in other cases even export your own electricity so that other people can use them. So this is being a producer and a consumer, hence prosumer.
So in the future the grid becomes far more of a two-way system than it is now?
Yeah, so most electricity networks were designed with the assumption, certainly local networks, that the power flows in one direction. It goes in where it comes off the national grid and it comes out at the consumer's end. But increasingly, where you've got consumers exporting their own electricity from their solar panels, you might find bi-directional flows. And this is very, very challenging for the network companies in terms of how they manage their power systems. They need new information, new tools, new forecasting abilities to ensure that the power quality for other consumers isn't adversely affected.
And these huge shifts also mean some big changes for the markets.
Yes, so we have an electricity market again that was designed very much with the view that you have large electricity generation and you have competition between those generators. But in this future world, of course, we're going to want to allow small generators, these prosumers that we were talking about, to be able to compete with the very large power stations. And that's going to require changes both to the market rules, but also the network access rules, so the ability of people to wheel their electricity and have it consumed by other people.
And in the mix of renewables, solar is going to be bigger than ever.
Yes, that's right. I mean, my standing joke about solar is that it's been around forever. And the most famous example of solar that I'm aware of from my youth was in the moon landings. The lunar rover vehicle had solar panels on it because, of course, there was nowhere else to get electricity from. And the cost of these things would have been bazillions of dollars for the equivalent of a AA battery. But what's happened over the last 50 years is that the price of solar for a given amount of generation has fallen exponentially. So now solar panels in some cases are just as cheap as the electricity that's reticulated through the national grid. And so where people choose to take advantage of that, in some cases they may choose to actually disconnect from the grid and be entirely self-sufficient, just relying on batteries to save the power that they generate during the day to use when the sun's not shining.
Or also play a role in contributing to the grid.
Yes, absolutely. So, I mean, one of the problems with solar, I suppose, is that it only generates electricity when the sun's shining. But if there's a demand for electricity when the sun's not shining, then people can inject their power and get paid whatever it's worth at that time. But more sophisticated consumers might choose to store it in batteries and then inject it into the grid when there's a real shortage of electricity, and in cases like that you could potentially really make quite a lot of money. I mean, if I had a crystal ball, I probably wouldn't be doing this interview, Rod, but I think it does look as though the price of solar is going to continue to fall into the future, so it will become increasingly competitive with all other generating technologies. And just recently, a very large developer of solar projects has signed a connection agreement with the National Grid, Transpower, for an extremely large solar farm that's going to be in Edgecombe, up near Whakatane. And this is a project that's the same size as a traditional power station, so it really is changing the paradigm about which generation technologies are going to be competing in the future and the scale at which solar will be participating. And so for New Zealand it's a bit of a first, and it's really quite exciting for that reason.
Kia Kotahi Ako's vision is for Indigenous wisdom to transform education and environmental solutions from Aotearoa. And so we have a number of projects working with schools, with businesses, and Champion Te Ao Māori initiatives. The solar project that we are working on piloting in Aotearoa has been running for about 8 years in the US. The program in the US has been running mainly in high schools, and we said, no, we want to try this in primary schools, and let's give students in Tamariki the opportunity to learn about solar, learn about renewable energy, and hopefully spark new ideas for solving the climate and energy challenges that we have.
And they're using exactly the same manuals that the high school students are using, are they?
Yeah, so the primary students that have been using the same as the high school students, the resources, I think they have had some challenges, and the students told us that the wiring was quite difficult, but they overcame it, and that's the whole point of the program, is to learn about these challenges and to become solutionaries for the future, so the students can help design a better future.
At Helios, we're really invested in creating a positive legacy with the projects that we develop around the country, which has led us to a partnership with Kia Kotahi Ako. And as part of that, we're looking to develop partnerships in schools, in locations wherever we develop solar farms. So coming here today to see the pilot was a really exciting opportunity to see it in practice and hands-on and how that's all working. So while we don't have a project close by, as we roll out our portfolio across the country, we'll look to then roll out a We Share Solar scheme nearby so that kids can do it in the classrooms and then come see us on site and see the solar farms being constructed and see the real world connection between what's happening at their desk and what's happening in the farm next door. The thing with solar is it's so new to New Zealand. We've seen rooftop before, but ground mount is something new, it's different, and people don't understand how it looks, how it feels. And so we really have to take people on that journey. So we've been door knocking and speaking to the neighbours nearby, closely involved with key stakeholders, answering any questions. There's a lot of thoughts around what this will look like and how it will feel. So we're working really interactively there around planting plans and setbacks and how these develop. So they're part of the community, and once they're there, people won't notice they're nearby, and they're doing their part to significantly benefit the future of the country.